What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. In this video, I want to prove that even though I might have an opinion about who is the GOAT when it comes to NBA basketball, I am always willing to look at evidence rather than being so fixated on my own personal opinion, being so enamored with my personal opinion. I am not a person who is so egotistical and is so willing to save face that I can't look at evidence and be willing to change my mind and my perception about certain things. Now, I have, made videos recently saying that I think that Will Chamberlain is the GOAT. I've been really looking at that time period when Wilt played, and I've come to the conclusion that aside from all of the accomplishments that he's had, a lot of the things that he gets criticized for not winning enough, I think that it's unfair. And when you really look at those series, there are other people that should share blame, but it's kind of microscoped around Wilt too much, too often. And a lot of the teams that he did lose to, and by today's, perspective, we would call them super teams. Okay. So, having said that, though, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar does have an excellent case for being the GOAT. I mean, number one, he's the all-time leading scorer, 38,387 points. He first ascended to the scoring throne in April of 1984. So it's the 83-84 season when he passed Wilt in all-time scoring with 31,420 points in a game against the Utah Jazz in a hook shot, or skyhook rather, over the outstretched arms of defensive juggernaut Mark Eaton. Now, that was 37 years ago. Okay. Now Kareem would go on to play 5 more years and finish with over 38,000 points. But he's been an all-time leading scorer for 37 years. Now LeBron James does loom in the distance, not too far distance, and perhaps surpassing him. We'll have to wait and see. But for to be the number one guy for that long is very impressive. Then you look at the fact that Kareem, even though he was never seen as a bruiser or a dominating box out rebounder, he was more of a finesse guy. When he retired, he still finished third all time in rebounds with 17,440, and that's second only to Wilt and Bill. And when you add the ABA, he still finishes fourth, with only Moses slightly moving ahead of him in that category. So look, Kareem wasn't a great offensive rebounder, but still, for his career, he averaged 11.2 rebounds per game. And he did lead the NBA rebounding one season. So even though he gets knocked for not being a great rebounder, some of that I think is a little bit unwarranted. Because you got to remember, Kareem was able to play until he was 42 years old. Some of that was because he didn't have some of the wear and tear that other players might have had on lesser teams. When he was playing with the Showtime Lakers, the Magic Johnson Lakers, remember, Magic was a strong rebounder himself. Magic averaged, even though he was a point guard, he averaged over 7 rebounds a game, if I'm not mistaken, at his position. 7 at the point guard. Then you have to remember that he had other guys on the team, Michael Thompson, Bob McAdoo for a stretch, AC Green, James Worthy, um, who else? Who am I forgetting? Kurt Rambis. Um, he had other guys, Mitch Kupchak. Not that it was great rebound, but these are other guys who were rugged rebounders in their own right. So Kareem didn't have to focus on rebounding as much. That's why he had seasons only averaging, uh, 6, 7 rebounds toward the end because he didn't have to focus on that part of the game. So let's explain that. Passing. He was a UCLA player. He's from UCLA. He was a very good passing big man. However, that was not usually his defined role, on any particular team. This was still the era of players having roles. A big man was not running the offense back then. You didn't see Nikola Jokic's back then. So, you're not going to see Kareem with or even Bill Walton averaging 8, 9 assists per game. But he was a really good passing big man. And his 5,000, I believe it was 5,660 career assists, I believe is still number one all time for a center. Now, that may not be the case in a couple of more years, but he's still number one in that category. Blocks, 3,189 when he retired, number one all time officially. Now, I believe that since then he slipped to third, if I'm not mistaken, behind Olajuwon and Dikembe Mutombo. But technically, he would be number one. He would be in front of them, excuse me, if blocks from his first 4 seasons were counted. And I'll tell you why. At that particular time, Lou Alcindor slash Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in the prime of his career, playing with Milwaukee when he was doing more. Okay, this is the Kareem that was averaging anywhere between 27 to 34 points a game. I believe one year he averaged almost 35 points a game. This is the Kareem that was averaging more around 14 to 16 rebounds per game. And this is the Kareem that was usually averaging between 3.5 to 4.5 blocks per game. So to just give a conservative estimate of 3 blocks per game over a span of 4 years, let's just give him even 70, 75 games played, then that would put him over 4,000 career blocks and ahead of Akeem Olajuwon. Now, not as prolific per game, but because of the 1,560 games played, um, he would be number one all time in blocks if blocks were counted from 69. Now, if you count blocks, indiscriminately since the beginning of the NBA or beginning of pro basketball, then the number one shot blocker, as I always said, would probably be Wilt Chamberlain, followed by Bill Russell, then maybe Nate Thurmond being third. Now, defensively, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is sort of underrated. Um, he was not a shutdown defender, and there were guys. There were a certain prototype type player that he struggled against. Um, let me see, how can I say this? Kareem was a very good shot blocker, but he struggled with and with the shot blocking, he often was good at help defense, but he struggled against the prototypical bruising um, powerhouse type centers like the Moses Malones, the Artis Gilmores. He probably would have struggled more against Wilt had Wilt been in his prime and not more of a defensive guy and fourth, fifth option guy by the time Kareem came along. But he did struggle against those types of players. But one thing I will say about Kareem, defensively, he was above average. Offensively, he was the most dangerous weapon, the most dangerous offensive player in the game throughout most of his career. Okay. Um, and he had the most unstoppable shot in NBA history. No, it's not Dirk Nowitzki's, it's not Dirk Nowitzki's one-legged fall-away jumper or Jordan's, um, fadeaway jumper. It's not, uh, you know, uh, James Harden's step back. and it's not Steph Curry pulling up from 40. The skyhook really could not be stopped. Okay. Um, and let's not forget, this came in an era where most big men and a lot of tweeners had hook shots. You know what I'm saying? It was a very commonplace shot, but Kareem perfected that shot, and he had such a touch on that skyhook that he could make that hook from really absurd distances for a big man. I mean, I've seen him make that skyhook from damn near 20 feet out in some games. I mean, and with a hand in his face. So it's he perfected, that shot had such a touch on it. It was a devastating weapon. And he shot 56% from the floor for his career. So this is a guy that was very, very efficient. Um, had an even higher career field goal percentage than Will Chamberlain. And unlike Wilt, and unlike Bill Russell, and unlike Shaq, and some others, Giannis as of late, Kareem was a pretty good foul shooter, 72% for his career. That's pretty good for a big man, especially one that's 7'2" in height, 7'3" if they listed today in shoes. Well, up until a couple years ago, they listed in shoes. So he had a really good touch. He was 225 pounds when he first came into the NBA, but slowly, to deal with the rigors of playing the center position, he got bigger, he got stronger. He worked on his flexibility all the time. As we all know, who really know about Kareem, he was into yoga, but he was also into martial arts. So this is a guy that could defend himself. Okay, even though he wasn't like a bruiser, don't get it twisted. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar could defend himself, and if push comes to shove, he could hurt you. If it actually came to a physical altercation, um, he may not win as far as uh, you know physicality, like moving you, but if actual fighting, Kareem probably could whoop your ass. Now, what else do I want to say about Kareem? He was a consummate team player, okay, and he played his role. Earlier on, he was when he was younger and fresher, right out of college, full of energy. Um, he was the most dominant player in the game. Um, however, no matter how dominant a center is, and we've seen this with Wilt with the extreme, averaging 50 and 25 one year. No matter how dominant a center is, you need help to win a championship. The formula for success for a championship team with a big man, to me, is he has to at least have a dominant perimeter player. Okay. And usually, along with the dominant perimeter player, it helps to have a couple of Dobermans and at least one other guy that could score, a third option. We saw that, for instance, with Kareem's team in Milwaukee when it was Oscar and him and Bob Dandridge, who was sort of like uh, maybe like the '70s version of Kawhi Leonard, a mid-range master. And we saw it later on with the Lakers, Showtime Lakers, Kareem, Magic, and even though they had other pieces, James Worthy, Shaq, Kobe. Third guy, one year was Rice, even though he wasn't a good fit. But later on, you could make an argument that the third guy was probably Robert Ory, Big Shot Bob, although those other guys too, Rick Fox and others. So Kareem was willing to sacrifice whatever it took to win. Some other guys have reputations of being selfish. Kareem was not. Kareem wasn't as strong as Wilt. He wasn't as explosive. He wasn't the best pure athlete, but he made the most out of what he had, and he was very, very good for very, very, very long. And it does anger me when people say that LeBron's longevity is unparalleled. Because you got to remember, LeBron came into the NBA at age 18, whereas Kareem was 22. So Kareem came in 4 years older. Yet Kareem was still putting up 17 points a game when he was 39 years old, 40 years old. He was still averaging over 17 points a game. This is a guy that was still averaging 20 points a game when he was 38, 39. So we can't keep going on this thing, this narrative. It's not accurate saying we've never seen a guy putting up 20 plus points at the age 36. That's bull. Um, Karl Malone was still averaging 20 plus points a game well into his late 30s. Michael Jordan, his last season in the NBA at age 40, was averaging 20 points per game. And he had injuries, Jordan, not to make excuses for his Wizards years, but Jordan did have certain injuries that he was playing with that in some people would necessitate hospitalization. Okay. And that's to I am King who thinks I'm a Jordan hater, you fucking dick. Stupid ass. Like you can't talk basketball without being objective. Coon ass bastard. But anyway, another argument for Kareem. And notice I haven't talked about championships. Most people they got to bring up championships, MVPs. I don't have to bring any of that stuff up. I can talk about other things. Let's talk about Kareem's competition. Okay. So when Kareem was playing in the 70s, his competition at the center position was Wilt Chamberlain, obviously. Then you had Bob Lanier. You had Bill Walton, his successor at UCLA, Nate Thurmond, Nate the Great, Walt Bellamy, uh, Zelmo Beatty, Willis Reed, Bob McAdoo, who initially played the center position with the Buffalo Braves. Jerry Lucas at times played the center position. Elvin Hayes initially played the center position, but primarily is known for playing the power forward position. But sometimes he did play center. Remember, he was the one that was uh, competing against Kareem in what was called the game of the century, the collegiate game. What was it? UCLA versus Houston, 1968 college game that I believe was won by Houston. And I think in that game, was that the game when I think Kareem was still suffering from a scratch cornea or something like that? So that's all Hall of Famers I named in the 1970s. Those are all Hall of Fame big men. Even in the 1980s, when Kareem was going on the downside of his career, he was still going up against big men like Moses Malone and Artis Gilmore, Robert Parrish, Patrick Ewing, Akeem Olajuwon, Jack Sigma. Um, Dan Essel was more a power forward, but he did play the center position. So I'll just put Dan Essel out there. And then even some people who didn't make the Hall of Fame, like Ralph Sampson and Joe Barry Carroll, okay, um, and Bill Laimbeer, you know, Brad Daugherty. So Kareem went against more Hall of Fame centers than anybody, anybody, anybody. So it makes me laugh when people say, "Oh, Kareem didn't really go." Yes, he did. He went up against Wilt Chamberlain all the way to Olajuwon and Ewing, and he barely missed going up against David Robinson. Now I'll mention the six championships. All right, six championships. the 6 league MVPs, record 6 league MVPs, 10 final appearances. Unlike LeBron, he has a winning record in the finals, 19-time All Star. Okay, that's an NBA record. I believe he has. I gotta think about this. I believe he has 2 Finals MVPs. Okay, 1971 and I believe 1985. You could argue that he should have won Finals MVP in '80 as well. I understand why they gave it to Magic because of that performance in Game 7. But until he got injured, Kareem was the obvious pick for Finals MVP. Okay, and they probably should have still gave it to Kareem based on his performance. Um, but two, he has 2 Finals MVPs. He's the oldest Finals MVP ever at age 38. And the funny thing about it, in that 1985 NBA Finals against Boston, the Lakers got their ass handed to them in the first game of that series. It's called the Boston Massacre or the Memorial Day Massacre. I think they lost by something like 40, almost 40 points. And Kareem was almost invisible that game. And many people were saying, I think it's time for Kareem to retire. And he took that game very personal. And I read that he looked at footage, film for the next several games to see what he did wrong. And he was so mentally prepared to atone for that terrible performance that he dominated the rest of that series, the next 5 games. So let's look at the rest of his resume. All right. That's the basic stuff. 10 times he was All NBA first team, 5-time All NBA second team. 5 times he was NBA All Defensive first team, 6 times All Defensive second team. He's a 1969-70 Rookie of the Year. Twice he led the NBA in scoring. As a matter of fact, he is one of only 4 players to lead the NBA in scoring and win a championship the same season. The others being George Mikan, who did it twice, which I am cool did not seem to know. Shaq, who did it in 2000, while averaging 29.7 points per game. And Michael Jordan did do it 6 times, which is amazing. Okay, he did it 6 times. In 1990, he averaged 31.5 while winning his first championship. The next year, in '92, he averaged 30.1 points per game while winning his second championship. In '93, on a more depleted team bench-wise, his scoring went up to 32.6, winning the three-peat. In his first full season back in '96, he averaged 30.4 points per game while winning his 4th title. In '97, his scoring dipped a little bit to 29.6, but some of this was due to the fact that scoring was going down overall in the NBA, winning his 5th title. And then in 1998, Jordan averaged 28.7 points per game, although proportionally he actually was scoring more points that year than he did the 2 seasons prior for the Chicago Bulls, whose scoring went down from 105 point, it might have been 3 points per game in '96, all the way down to 96.7 in the '98 season. And that's when he won his final championship, also leading the NBA in scoring. So Kareem is in very rarefied company when it comes to that factoid. Now let's see what else. His number 33 is retired by 2 different franchises, the Bucks and the Lakers. He's on the 50th anniversary all-time team in 1996, obviously. He led the league in rebounding in 75-76. 4 times he led the NBA in blocks. And I'm going to assume that those are the only years he did it. I'm willing to bet that, he might have led the league in blocks in 69-70 because Wilt didn't really play that year. But I'm willing to bet in uh, 71, 72, and 73, Wilt probably led the NBA in blocks those 3 years. But Kareem may have led the NBA in blocks 5 different years, all right, which would have put him way up there with some of the most prodigious shot blockers in NBA history as far as leading the league in blocks. And he averaged 24.6 points per game for his career, 11.2 rebounds, 3.6 assists per game. And I want to check something out here, too. Kareem shot, let's see, Kareem had one, two, three. He led the NBA field goal percentage once, 76-77 season, when he shot 57.9% from the floor. But Kareem had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. He had 10 of his 20 seasons where he shot over 57% from the floor. And in, I believe, one season, the 79-80 season, which is last year he won MVP, he averaged 24.8 points, 10.8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, one steal, led the NBA in blocks with 3.4 blocks, shot 60.4% from the floor, and shot 77% from the foul line. But Kareem had some really incredible individual seasons. I mean, just absolutely incredible. For instance, the 74-75 season, he averaged 30 points, 14 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 3.3 blocks, and one steal. The next year, he averaged 27.7 points, 16.9 rebounds, leading the league, 5 assists, 4.1 blocks. So he averaged a career high of 5 assists per game. But some people think that all Kareem did was just shoot hook shots. This man had a completely refined all around game, completely refined. Um, his, the fact that he played at such a high level for so long, he has an excellent case for GOAT. You know what I'm saying? Not to mention that when you do PR rating, let's look at his career PR rating right quick because I know. Let's look at something right quick. This is the last stat I want to bring up right quick too. This is something they don't bring up often when they talk about player efficiency rating. All right. So Michael Jordan is number one at 27.91. LeBron is starting to fall a little bit in his PR because at one point he was at 27.72. Now he's at 27.41. Well, at one point in time, Shaquille O'Neal was number one all time in PR rating. Did you know that? He was number one all time. Number three in PR is Anthony Davis, 27.32. Shaq is fourth at 26.43. David Robinson is fifth at 26.18. Wilt Chamberlain is sixth. Now Kareem is 13th at 24.58. But I want to mention something to you. Note how with Kareem, they didn't count blocks his first 4 years, nor did they count steals. So those are numbers that add to your PR rating. With Wilt, they never counted it. Had they counted blocks and steals for Kareem's entire career, he'd be higher in PR rating. And if they counted blocks and steals for Wilt's entire career, he'd be number one all time in PER. So I just want to bring that up. Okay. So at the end of the day, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has an excellent case. When you look at his resume, when you look at his competition, when you look at stats, when you look at advanced metrics, when you look at every facet of the game, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has an excellent case for being the greatest of all time.